Welcome to Visione TV. Today we have a really guest of exception, Tara Reade, who sparked the American and international media with an inflammatory stories that many have heard about, but many have had the chance to discuss directly with her about. Actually, few stories reveal the intersection between politics, media, and personal courage as powerful as the one of Tara Reade. Tara Reade is a former United States Senate aide, author, and current contributor to RT. In 2020, Tara came forward against, at the time, presidential candidate Joe Biden with allegation of sexual assault, a sad story, a sad abuse she suffered at the time she was working for the United States Senate as aide and staffer, and as a result of outing this horrendous in the things she suffered, she was harassed not only by the media, but actually she suffered threats to her life. Tara Reade's story has sparked one of the most politically charged controversy in recent US history, and amid threats, censorship, and intense media hostility, she ultimately sought asylum in Russia, where she was recently granted citizenship. Today, Tara lives in Moscow, where continues her work as political commentator, and her story challenges many of the narratives we have been told about truth, justice, and ultimately East and West relationship. Tara, thank you so much for joining Visione TV.
Mille grazie for having me. Ciao, everyone.
Grazie mille, spasiba. Tara, you recently gave an interview to The Spectator, in which you said something that really struck my attention. You said that in most of Hollywood scripts, Russia is portrayed as the villain, while in your real life story, Russia ended up being the hero. So can you tell us how an American woman ended up finally finding safety and freedom in Russia?
You know, that was such an amazing time, and thank you for starting with that. I actually was able to write that op-ed, and the Spectator world didn't edit it. It left it as is, and it published it. So I was very surprised and very happy. And I want to thank Jackie Jordan, who had her hand in that, because she published my first book, Left Out When the Truth Doesn't Fit In. And you can find that on an Amazon link if you want to purchase it. But I came, speaking of that book, to Moscow to have it translated into Russian. And I was only here for 1 week. Maria Butina had invited me on Channel 1. So I did an interview for Maria Butina on Channel 1 at the time she had a show. And she is now a Duma member in the Russian Duma. And then during the week while I was sightseeing and staying here, I started getting messages that if I were to return to the US, I could possibly face prison. I was accused of violating sanctions because I was on a Russian show. I was basically being harassed. And the reason for that is Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene. Matt Gaetz was the former congressman. Marjorie Taylor Greene is still the congresswoman from Georgia. We're going to have me testify about not only Biden's corruption, but the weaponization of the DOJ and FBI. So not just about my case, which is one thing, of them covering up my complaint to the Senate, but also about the weaponization of the DOJ and FBI against any whistleblower that came forward, you know, and of course, we've all seen what's happened to the January 6th people. So that was coming. And so the Biden administration had reason to want me to be silenced or eliminated, is what I was told, and by different people close to politics in the US. So I called actually Matt Gaetz' office, and luckily he took my call and spoke with me. And he said he had some current concerns for my personal safety as well. And, you know, I took his, you know, what he said seriously. And I really appreciate his heroism for being honest with me about that. I also talked to other people, other former intelligence, and I decided, okay, this is really painful because I have a daughter. She's grown, but, you know, we're close back in the US. I have pets, family, but I made the choice to stay safe, and I took political asylum. And Maria Butina and Margarita Simenon of RT really helped me with that path, applying for asylum and safety. And luckily, within a few weeks, I was granted political asylum, which is very rare
Absolutely.
in every country, but in Russia, especially, you know, from an American, right? So, yeah, and so then I was really kind of in shock, kind of going through that. And then Margarita Simenon offered me a full-time position at RT using my, you know, I have a law degree and a background in geopolitical and, you know, analysis. And so I was able to work with them. So luckily I was able to start rebuilding my life thanks to these two very strong Russian women and President Putin. So that's the beginning of how that all kind of fell into place. And what I want people to understand is that Russia is not how it's portrayed in the Western media. It's very clean. It's very beautiful. And Simona, you've just been here, so you can speak to what I'm saying about Moscow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tara, I
So,
was recently in Moscow where we finally met in person, had this great pleasure, and I was actually impressed, really impressed with safety and overall the incredible functioning society despite everything that has been said about this military operation, right, and all the effects on it. But Tara, you really hit a very important point. And it's the weaponization of the Department of Justice going after whistleblowers like yourself simply for speaking their truth. So you have not only been neglected as a woman victim of sexual assault, but you have been targeted as a whistleblower exposing the truth. So this is really something I want to draw our audience attention on, and how insane is the West talking about democracy, fundamental rights, demonizing Russia, attributing to Russia the denial of everything they preach, for ultimately putting you in the position to asking asylum to the very same country they demonized, and where you're finally safe and rebuilding your life and career. So you mentioned Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene. I want to remind our audience in Italy, these are outstanding Congress representatives in the United States. Matt Gaetz has sought the truth not only against the Russia investigation, the fake Russia investigations, but has always been the voice of many people like Tara Reade, that were brave enough to exposing corruption on the Democrat sides, as I call it, the Democrats. So Tara, do you feel that besides Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene, you felt United States, your home country, could have done more? And how your perception of all this mischaracterization of Russia from Western media has changed since you lived in Moscow?
well, two things. First, you know, the Biden administration has a stranglehold, you know, it's part of the deep state, and it has a stranglehold on some of the courts. So they kind of use the same playbook on Trump, on January 6 people, on anybody that opposes their narratives, right? And that playbook is first you attack the character, you know, then you threaten with prison, then you threaten with lawfare, and then, you know, it goes from there. And some people, unfortunately, as we know of, have died under suspicious circumstances. So it's a very serious problem right now. I think the assassination of Charlie Kirk was jarring to all of us that supports freedom of speech. He was a very peaceful Christian man who was debating on college campuses, who was very much against these proxy wars and against the military industrial complex, and was all about traditional values. And his views, you know, actually ignited conversations with the younger generations that need to happen. And he really had a connection to the younger generation because he was young himself. He was 32 when he was assassinated. So I know your Italian audience who has seen this that happened on live stream must have been shocked because, of course, as an American, we were all shocked to see someone of his caliber be shot in broad daylight. And now the investigation is ongoing, but questionable, like what's going on. There's lots of questions around it. So yeah, you mentioned democracy. It's like free speech and democracy are being silenced under the Democrats, the Democrats, or that elite. I'll go further. It's definitely a globalist kind of agenda. And Donald Trump is fighting back against that. He's trying. But he also has a lot of sabotage within, the hawks that are around him, the neocons that are around him. So it's tough. So could they have done more? Yes, absolutely. But I really feel grateful to the people who did help me. Tucker Carlson gave me a platform. Megyn Kelly, yourself, George, your husband, Roger Stone, Glenn Beck. There are people who really cared about my story and really tried to reach out to me and give me that support. And thank goodness for all of you, because it made me feel less alone. But as far as the government, it was a very scary time. Yeah.
And we are thankful for you, Tara, for being so courageous to speak and expose the truth in very sensitive times. And you mentioned the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk, which shows that all your concerns and concerns of people who dare speaking their voice in the democratic West are real. So all this democratic apparatus which call out President Trump and label him as a fascist, actually they are the fascists. They are projecting everything they do and everything they implement. And we have only one choice: to keep speaking loud and be grateful to whoever grant protection. In your case, not only wonderful people in the United States that I believe they're still supporting you, they're still waiting for you to come back and share their story on a huge platform, by the way. You're very much waited. And but also, Russia, countries like Russia, that despite this demonization are there trying to open the dialogue. You mentioned I was recently in Russia, and I was actually surprised, as for the 20th anniversary of RT, you had the presence of journalists like myself coming from the very same countries that censored RT. So what does this tell us about freedom of speech and openness to the dialogue? Who is real raising walls?
RT's always been all about truth. And in fact, when I'm doing a live shot, preparing, or when I'm doing anything written, I'm never censored. I'm never edited. And, I think another person, Lee Camp, had a show for 7 years on RT, and he talked about how he was never censored or edited. And he said it was one of the most creative, robust times of his life because he didn't have this overlord. So yes, I'm in a structure of RT, but I don't feel that pressure that you do in the United States with some of the media there, where there are certain things. I mean, we all saw Tucker Carlson get fired from Fox because he spoke the truth. So yeah, there's definitely what you saw at the gala, what you notice of Western, there's definitely a welcoming here in Russia. Russians don't hold it against Americans or Europeans per se, the bias against Russia. They know it's coming from the elite government members. So, Russia's not the enemy. And that's the main thing for everyone to keep in mind. They are not the enemy, and they prove it over and over again. And I think this latest visit by Dmitry Kirill, meeting with some of the congressional members of, in the US, is another example of them trying to forge peace.
And that's actually where real peace comes from. It comes from dialogue and not labeling or demonizing one another. And about this specific aspect, you have not only built a very respected career as a commentator on RT, as you mentioned, but you have also become a bridge between two worlds. You help, and you constantly help, reopen dialogue between Russia and America. And that's why it's an honor to hear from you today. I want our audience to know that you even are the person who facilitated one of the most talked about interviews of recent times. the ones of Tucker Carlson with Minister of Foreign Affairs Lavrov and the different conversations he held in Russia. So you were behind these efforts. And how did this even came first to your mind? And what challenges did you face to making it happen?
Well, I'm a woman of faith, but also of peace, and I was sincerely praying for peace. And it was at a particular moment when Biden was still in office and things were very tense. And I couldn't think of like, oh, what can we do here? And then it came to mind, I guess the answer to the prayers. I had a moment of thinking about Minister Lavrov. And then also when I woke up the next morning after thinking this, the idea pressed on me again. The first thing I looked at on my phone was Lavrov talking. And I know that he's very popular in the West. So I was very shy about asking Tucker Carlson about this because who am I to suggest guests? I'm not a producer of Tucker Carlson or anything like that. But he and I text sometimes, and I texted him and I said, hey, this might be a silly idea, but what do you think about interviewing Foreign Minister Lavrov? And he said, yes. Can you arrange it? And I said, I don't know. And then I knew someone that was involved. And so I was able to do that, to connect Tucker quickly that day. And then 3 days later, he was able to do the interview. So that was, really exciting. It was really good for a Western audience, Americans in particular, and Europeans, to hear Lavrov's position. I don't know if it helped. We're still working on peace. But I think every time that a Russian official appears in Western media and really reaches out to tell their side of the story and to explain what they're wanting, it's a time for us to listen as Westerners, to listen to what they're saying. And so that was my hope. And, thank you for bringing that up because it's been difficult to be a bridge when there's so much blockage from Western media and Western officials.
It's absolutely amazing how you achieved to challenge one of the biggest taboo in Western media, giving actually Russia a human and a balanced voice and presenting like also the helping facilitating interviews with Russian officials who have to say their side of the story, a side of the story that has been censored by all Western media. So now I just question all the media in general. What is the purpose of information if we are here to selectively promote one narrative? And we have heard about this conflict Ukraine, Russia, on all international medias for over 2 years now, and we only hear one side of the story. So having somebody like you, an American woman who lives in Russia, who became recently a Russian citizen, who lived on her own scheme, the lawfare and weaponization of the Department of Justice, that threats that are real, as the story of Charlie Kirk unfortunately showed us. How do you navigate these challenges? I mean, you are extremely strong, and I think you really are in a privileged position to talk to the Western media as an American woman who knows the other side of the story. How you navigate this challenge?
Well, I think, Simona, there's something that you and I have in common in that we're very authentically ourselves. And I think people respond to your interviews the same way they respond to, like, when I had my podcast, which is coming back, by the way, and other appearances I do. I'm just myself. I'm authentically myself. I'm not ethnically Russian. As a matter of fact, I'm, Irish Catholic background, but I definitely feel empathy for the Russian people, and I feel a connection to the Russian history and culture. So they often tell me I have a Russian soul, which is a very high compliment. But I saw the unfairness of just how the world was banning Russian athletes, Russian artists, composers in the West. And it was shocking to me. It was such blatant racism, if you will, against a culture and a history and a sovereign nation that's been around for 1,000 years. 1,000 years, imagine that. And America's so young compared to that. And even Italy is Russia and Italy are the same with their deep history and culture, but they both have a friendship as well. And you'll notice that what I notice is that Russia and Italy are close friends, more than some other European nations, and there's definitely a connection there too. Um, what I also want to say is I saw something disappointing. It was Jeffrey Sachs was talking with an Italian senator, and the Italian senator was denying that the 2014 coup happened. Well, Julian Assange gave up his freedom to reveal that the CIA was behind. That's a proven fact. Victoria Nuland and some of the people involved have admitted that there was a intelligence-backed coup in 2014 in Ukraine, that led to the regime change and you, Simona, were involved with, I believe, Ukraine on Fire and other documentaries that explored this. But it's interesting how an Italian senator would propagate such propaganda. So I think it's because, like you said earlier, not enough Russian voices are being heard in the Western media, and that includes Italian media.
Tara, you really said it correctly. Italy and Russia have historically had incredible relationship, even at personal level. We love Russian people love Italians. And I just feel that within the European Union, there is this ideological alliance to whatever United States set as a trend, right? So Joe Biden set this sick trend to demonize Russia, to impose sanctions to Russia. And even though the sanctions were collapsing European Union economies, Russia is our first importer of gas. We have wheat from this region as well, and our food is all based on pasta and bread and all these kind of things. So you can imagine how much we suffered here in the European regions and mostly in Italy. So why do you think, besides the misinformation, do you think like also this Russophobia is a propaganda tool to some sick agenda to turn even the European Union bloc against Russia and against its own interests?
Vero, yes, very much so, because, Tulsi Gabbard, who I met at the Rage Against the War Machine, just released all the CIA files verifying what you're just saying, that Russophobia was actually constructed. It was actually a thing, a project done by US intelligence and backed by Obama, and the Biden administration took it to the next level. So you're absolutely right. And that's not getting much Western coverage, if you notice. But there are some indictments that are coming down the road now for these people it's purposefully misleading the American people. And it's leading to such distrust for Americans and Europeans in their leaders that, you're seeing a lot of people really turn away from some of the leadership, like Macron, like in Great Britain, like in the US. And you see 70% of people, I think was the last statistic, that don't trust Western media. So 70% of Americans don't even trust the American mainstream media to tell them the truth. And that says a lot, because that's probably a conservative figure. Yeah, so what you're saying is very true. The propaganda was very controlled. It was very much done by the past administrations. And now, we're trying to push through this algorithm. And it was funded by people like Soros. So, you had billions of dollars behind this kind of weaponization of Russophobia.
Yes, and it's really frightening how some people over Europe still believes that they need to support Ukraine because Putin would love to expand his empire to France, Italy. That's so ridiculous that I don't even
Yeah.
know how people who have average education can even fall into this narrative. But they do. They do because of Soros machine and all these tools. But that's why we need independent leaders. How does Russia look at Giorgia Meloni, for example?
I think with caution, because she seems to be kind of aligning herself with the World Economic Forum and those kind of characters. I think that they're hoping that there will be better relations with Italy. we'll see. But right now things are still kind of, the European, as far as I know, she was behind some of the sanctions that were just put through by the EU. So I don't know. I'm hoping that she'll come around because she seems like the kind of person that, like, she did say this, which was hopeful. She said, no boots on the ground, no Italian boots on the ground in Ukraine, right? She put the border down there. And she also stopped aid going from Ukraine. But has she started again? I don't know. I don't know Italian politics that well, but I do know that I saw her entering it with some caution. Like, she was definitely not like Macron, who France, unfortunately, and Great Britain and Germany seem very bellicose and almost trying to push towards World War III. But I think she's smarter than that. And the Italian people collectively are smarter than that, and they won't allow it to happen.
Absolutely. And I was just driving through Rome, and I saw this wall with, like graffiti on the wall saying, we don't want to keep giving our resources to Nazis in Ukraine. So I said, okay, people dig their own research, right? And they probably know better. But how information is so important, and what your work, what you're doing is so important and so challenging. And how do you feel today about United States? I know you found your happiness, your rebirth, as you described it, in Russia, but would you see yourself eventually at some point being safe in the United States? When I talk about safety, I don't talk simply about physical elimination, but I talk also about legal attacks you could face by this weaponized deep state.
Well, my lawyer's still trying to work on the sealed case that's there in the US. So I don't know. But I do know that I will be visiting the US and seeing my family and going back and forth between the US and Russia, which is what I originally had hoped to do anyway. And because I just love Russia, I want to explore it more. But my family, I will always visit in the United States. How I feel is that right now I'm rebuilding my life, and I'm kind of just taking day to day, step by step, enjoying my time here. The cost of living is good. When I take the metro, it's clean. It looks like a museum. You
Let's talk
don't
about
have the
that.
drugs and homeless. Yeah. And I mean, you can walk around the parks and you don't have to worry about being robbed or petty theft, because it's just families and people in the park. But it's much lower crime rate here. And aesthetically it's beautiful. We were just down in Sochi. Sochi is just gorgeous. And yeah, it's another place to definitely, you should visit there, Simona, next time you come.
Absolutely. And my last trip to Moscow, with my first actually trip to Moscow, I was so impressed. I could, while we were having lunch, I could leave my bags, my purse, and my iPhone completely inside, so nobody would even look at it. And while if you go to New York, a metro station, you should be worried for your life. And when you walk into Moscow metro station, you think you're in a five-star hall of a lobby
Yeah.
of a hotel,
Like the
luxury.
Ritz-Carlton or something. Yeah, I know. It's beautiful.
It
It's
was
all
actually
marble, gorgeous.
refreshing to see there are still part of the world that live in a healthy society. And that's why I think it's important that you keep your work as someone who lives now in Russia and who sees all these things. Would you consider it also to be a speaker and the forums in both United States and Europe to educate people about reality, about this side? How is to live in Russia? If we want to visit Russia, how can we visit Russia? How is to work in Russia? Why we should delete, why they taught us to delete Russia from geopolitical map, and even as a journalist being afraid to mention Russia, right? Because if you do, you can be in trouble. How can we overcome all this?
I'm hoping that Italy is not the same. Like mi piace Italia, Verona, a Firenze. It's so che bella, it's so beautiful,
Che aspettiamo.
everywhere you go. But my hope is that I can visit Italy again and have like the talks that you're talking about and not be bothered by the authorities. I don't know what a Italian politics are like about talking about Russia, but in America, it's very closed. It's very hard. So you have to be very careful. But now under the Trump administration, he's trying slowly to change that. We're still having, the peace talks. There's still tensions, but I think Donald Trump has a more positive attitude towards Russia and really genuinely wants to have positive trade deals and things like that. So I think we're heading in the right direction in America. Europe, I don't know, like France and Great Britain, they still seem very bellicose and, are arresting citizens for memes and being on Twitter, which is crazy, for words, for freedom of speech. So it's, but they're doing it under the anti-terrorism, like in Great Britain. They held George Galloway, who had just come from Russia, in Great Britain, and under the Anti-Terrorism Act, then dropped it, right? Because George Galloway is obviously not a terrorist,
Absolutely
and I mean, but using that kind of language to make normal everyday people sound like they have weapons of mass, that could do harm is really, it's just wrong. It's legal overreach, and it's disgusting that Great Britain and Germany and France are doing that.
It is, and it's deep misinformation because they not only they censor platforms, that they threaten people who they are speaking their truth. So people must fear for their legal safety at the least, if they dare presenting facts that don't align with their narratives. But that's why we are so proud to have you here, and hopefully more people will tune in your work, where of course art is still censored in most of you, in all of Europe, I would say.
Yeah.
So before this will, I hope, be worked out in the next future, where people can find you, follow your work, buy your book, because I mean, I think many people after hearing from this conversation will want to follow daily what
you can contact me directly. It's Tara Reade, TARAREADE, podcast.com. So that's a link tree. It takes you to all my links, my social media. So Tara Reade, podcast.com. And, I look forward to talking with you again. I look forward to you coming to Russia again for another visit, and maybe seeing St. Petersburg or Sochi, some of the other locations, because it is such a vast and beautiful country, and with a really good cost of living. So if any of your viewers, listeners want to have more information, they can contact me directly, and I can, kind of tell them ideas of where to get a visa and how to manage coming for a visit.
Thank you very much. I look forward coming back, and I look forward also seeing you on Western platforms. We want to hear from you directly, gather for whoever people wants to have a little taste, a little of what real information and real world is about. You should be, it's an honor for us to have you talking to us in both in the United States, but in Europe, and not only in Italy, but in different forums. And as for now, thank you so much for being available to our audience, and for keep embracing this challenging, talking the truth. We're really grateful for you here today. Grazie mille, Tara. It was such a pleasure having you on Visione TV.
Grazie. Arrivederci.
And thank you so much for joining Visione TV. Stay with us for more conversation that challenge assumptions and open new perspective and the world we live in. Thank you.